Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the shop. Today I want to start working on this little horizontal mill. I want to get it completely taken apart, get it cleaned up, more than likely repaint it. Also, I want to be able to get the measurements that I need to make the micrometer dials for the table and the head. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull the head from the machine, get it over to the bench, and we'll pull the spindle to see how the bearings have held up over the years. So first thing we need to do is take off this plate off the top, and for whatever reason, I have no clue, but the previous owner put spacers here that look to be about 1/4 of an inch. Again, I have no clue why those are there. They will not be going back in when I put it back together. And the previous owner, when he had it apart, must have lost one of these screws, because these are two different sized cap screws. And I just lost the spacer, but I don't care, I'm not going to use it again. Now, to get the head off, it is connected to the motor mount. And the way that it works is the motor mount, as you can see, actuates up and down with the head. This is so that it can keep constant tension on the pulley or on the belts. So here it's just a split ring that connects the motor mount to the head. And I would love to be able to pull the lever off. However, the previous owner used JB weld and it to keep that handle on. It must have threads must have stripped out. So getting that off is going to be a chore, and that just slips out. As you can see, it's just the split ring that holds it to the spindle, and then it pivots on this rod to keep the tension on the belt. Now next we have to disengage the rack. It's a rack and pinion system that for this lever here. Again, it just uses a couple cap screws. Put this top one back in and take the bottom one out first. Now the whole spindle and then here you can see the pinion gear that actuates the head up and down on the rack. And then there's the rack. Then the other piece that fell was the gib, which this is not an actual gib. This is just a piece of steel. I'll have to probably make a new gib for it. So let's get it over to the bench and pull the spindle out. Alright, we got the head here on the bench. I went ahead and pulled the cone pulley off. It was just held on by a nut and a set screw, and it was a bear to get off. It was stuck on here pretty good. The One reason being is right here on the end, it was flared a few thousandths. So the pulley wasn't able to slip past the far end here. And I think it was flared out because it was worked on previously by what Mr. Pete would call a hammer and chisel mechanic. Because there's quite a few ding marks right here on the end of the spindle from a hammer. So this end was flared out a few thousandths. And I hated to have to do it, but I had to file this down right here on the end to be able to slip the pulley off. And again, I hated to have to do that, so I'm going to have to use a thread file to fix the threads because the nut no longer threads on. But that's not a huge deal. Like I said, I could just use the thread file to fix the threads on the end and it should be fine. So next, these two outer rings, they're made from cast aluminum, I believe, are just held on by 3 cap screws. So we'll go ahead and pull those out. And the ring should just slip off. And surprisingly, it actually has roller bearings in it. Being that it has Gitz oilers on the side, I figured it was going to be bronze or cast bearings, similar to what the spindles in the South Bend lathes have. So we'll go ahead and pull the front one off as well. That one's not going to come off as easy. I'll just use a plastic hammer, give it a little persuasion. And these don't look too terrible. This actually has a felt gasket on the inside, keep the dirt and stuff out. And there's a roller bearing on the front side as well. The spindle is held in by this locking nut here, and there's actually a splined washer in here, and it's actually pinned in place. So I'm gonna have to find my chisel, or a punch rather, and bend that tab down so I can get that nut off. So let me do that real quick. Alright, I got the locking ring tab pushed down and got the nut loosened. There's the nut, and then here's that locking ring. One of these tabs were bent over into these little slots in the nut here, just to lock it down in place. Now the spindle is pressed in to the bearings, so I have to go and press it out. So I'm going to go do that real quick and I'll be right back. Alright, I got the spindle pressed out. It doesn't seem to be in too bad a shape. There is a little bit of surface rust right here in the middle, but that's not a bearing surface, so I'm not too concerned about it. The actual bearing surfaces, well, they're not really bearing surfaces at all. It's just a journal that the bearings are press fit onto. They're in really good shape. There's no pitting or anything, and they look pretty good. Now, I'm not entirely sure what the Gets oilers are for. Not exactly sure what they feed to. So we'll take this apart a little bit further. I'm going to have to get my bearing puller to get the bearings out of here. And then we'll go from there. Yeah, I got the bearings out. They don't seem to be in too bad a shape. There doesn't seem to be any grit or anything inside them. I am going to clean them up for it. Well, this one has, I don't know if that's grit or if the bearing is bad, but there's a little, I can hear and I can feel a little click as I'm spinning it. I'm going to put it up next to the microphone. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear it or not. Kind of sounds like there's probably some grit or something in it. I'm going to clean it out really good. And if it's still doing it, then I'm going to go ahead and replace the bearing. Let's see. These are new departure bearings, 3206 for this one. And this one, it's also new departure, 5206. The larger bearing was in the front, which makes sense because that's where the most load is from when you're milling. And then the smaller one was in the rear. Now to get this out, on this end there's a snap ring. So go ahead and try and get that out of here. Of course my snap rings are junk. Alright, so I'm going to have to press that out too. I'll be right back. Alright, I didn't have to press them out. They were just held in tight. There's an O-ring that seals off the bearings, one on each end. Now this spins freely inside there. Because remember, this is where that clamp goes for the motor mount. And it spins freely about the spindle. That allows it to keep the tension, or the drive belt tension. And these here, I will replace these O-rings. We'll get these cleaned up really well. Inside of the housing, everything looks really good. I don't see any major issues. Now, in getting this apart, I figured out that these Gets oilers here are what keep this lubricated. They keep this lubricated and not the spindle. So, I thought that was a little strange, but it works. Alright, get another wrench. Take these Gets oilers off. Gorilla tighten this one. Lord. These things do not need to be this tight, people. I don't know what they were thinking. Okay, so gets oilers, come in here, and then, I don't know if you can see it, there's that hole there, that's where it comes out. And these sleeves here ride right up near that oil hole, so that it lubricates these surfaces here. I'm assuming that some of the oil gets here into the bearings. I mean, these bearings do have oil in them, so I guess it does get in there somehow. Overall, the spindle and the head are in pretty decent shape. Like I said, the only major issue that I had was the end of the spindle was flared out because of the person who had it apart last decided to pound on it with a hammer. Again, as Mr. Pete calls them, the hammer and chisel mechanic. Now I am missing one Gibbs screw, so I'll have to source those and get a replacement. This one is a locking. I believe that there used to be a this one here. I believe it used to be a one of those butterfly nuts or screws with the so that you can get it with your fingers. That's been lost and was replaced by this flathead screw. I'll try and find a new locking screw to replace that flathead screw. But again, everything on the head seems to be in really good shape. There's not a whole lot of surface rust, actually none at all on the dovetails. So we'll just wipe those down, clean them up a little bit. One thing that I noticed that kind of surprised at actually is the surfaces on these rails here, they're just a machined surface. They have not been scraped or even ground. You can see the swirl marks just from the machining. And then right here it's bright and shiny here and here. Those are the spots where it's mating up against the body of the mill itself. And on this side, it's touching here and a little bit up here. There's not a whole lot I can do about that. I do not know how to scrape. If I did, I would probably scrape this so that the mating surfaces were all nice and flat. But again, I don't know how to scrape, so I won't be doing that. I'll just continue to use it as is. Anyway, that'll do it for this part of the video. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.